Hello and welcome. This is episode 14 of a podcast Engineer-to-Manager. My name is Alex Maestrenko. This is the last episode of this year and I'm happy that we can make it very special. Today I'm joined by two great hosts of the Soft Skills Engineering podcast, Dave Smith and Jamison Dance.
Hello.
Hello guys, how are you doing?
Excellent.
Doing swell.
Nice. I'm really happy to have you on the show. It's great to have a discussion with you. And if you, dear listeners, don't listen on a weekly basis to funny advices by Dave and Jamison, just go ahead, put this video on a pause and subscribe in your favorite application to listen to those two great guys.
That is so kind of you. Now, you should watch your analytics to see how many people drop off and are like,
well,
no.
We'll see.
We tried it and we're not going to listen to the rest of this
Viewers
episode.
went to 0. Actually, that usually happens when my face comes on camera. It's just like, boom, 0.
Come on, that's not that bad. That's not bad. We'll see how it goes. And now, as you're back to the show, just don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video if you haven't done this yet. So let's get started, guys, just to get to know you a little bit, because in the show you talk about questions, but I haven't heard or couldn't find a little bit information about your background. You're not exposed a lot because you have very interesting careers. Both of you, I was like, wow, Amazon, Walmart, small companies, big companies. So it's kind of going back and forth. Also, their engineering and management pendulum. Well, like, okay, I want to code something. No, I'm done with this. I want to manage people and so on and so forth. So what has been the motivation for you to do this path and end up in the management job where you are now?
Well, I should answer first because for me, I just always want to have a bigger, more important title than Jamison. Whatever that is.
A longer or more important?
Longer is fine. More important is fine.
Jamison, what about you?
I think I was relatively better at it than at software development. And I don't know if that means I'm like actually better at management than software development, but I think that I've met a lot of really skilled software developers. And I feel like the average skill level in management is maybe a bit lower. I don't know. Now I'm just crapping on the whole field, I guess. For my interests and skill sets, where I like technical stuff, I like writing code, I really like talking to people, I like thinking about helping other people get stuff done. And that's more of the job in management than in software development. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm good enough at writing code, but I'm not like the best I always work with people that are way better than I am at writing code, and in management as well. But I feel like I'm like near, I don't know, I'm more skilled at the management stuff than at the software stuff relatively, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, in the software stuff, it's easy. You just count the line of codes that you wrote. And in the management, it's very hard to understand whether their management is effective or not. Do you mean that?
Yeah, you can hide.
Yeah,
you can hide.
exactly.
There's no metrics. James, I've been hearing you say, if you can't beat them, lead them.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, nice. So very motivated to end up in the management position. Specifically, like the comparison with from Dave. That okay. Well, whatever Jamison does, I just do it better. So
that's
even
true in life generally.
Looks aren't everything.
Good at lots of things.
Nice. Well, but you know what, Dave? Now you have a shorter answer. So here, Jamison just
killed me.
Was far ahead.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, let me answer this question as well, Alex. Maybe a little more seriously, but I don't know why I ended up in management. I feel like it happened to me, and it wasn't something that I ever wanted. But I remember going back 20 years. So I started my first real programming job about 20 years ago. Actually, 20 years ago this year. And from the very beginning, within that first year, I started having leaders push me toward doing more leadership-y things. Like, hey, we want you to be a technical lead on this team. Or, hey, we need you to go and meet with a customer. Or, hey, we need you to interface with the program manager and give status updates on behalf of your team. And I hated it. And I left jobs over this because people would push me and push me and push me. And I would wake up one day and I would realize all I'm doing is going to meetings, talking about status, planning, leading other engineers, and I'm not writing code and having fun. So probably at 3 or 4 jobs, I've noticed this kind of gravity pulling me towards more formal leadership. And I completely pushed back. And the way that I escaped the gravity well was I actually just rocket shipped away from the job and went to a new job, and it would reset the clock, and it would be like, well, but after about a year, starting to lean toward management. So around 2016, I just gave up and I said, okay, I'm going to go for this all the way. And it was triggered by a very specific instance where we had a director at our company who left. And I was just an engineer on a team, kind of a tech lead, but not really doing formal management. And the director left. And I went to my CTO, who I noticed was struggling to replace this person. And I said, look, I hate this idea, but I'm willing to volunteer as a manager here to fill the gap until you can find someone who will actually be a manager. And I thought, okay, I'll do the engineering management job for a while. Well, anyway, my boss said, or the CTO said, sounds good. And then the next week we had an all hands meeting, and he introduced me as the director of engineering for the company. And there was like 50 engineers. So I went from basically an individual contributor tech lead, having dabbled in management, to a director managing like 3 or 4 other engineering teams at the same time. It was fine. I actually enjoyed it. It was all new challenges. It was great. But I didn't even stay. I didn't stay there. I actually, after a few years of that, I left and then went back to be an individual contributor again for 4 more years. And again, the pull of management pulled me back in. And so finally I gave in again. And now I've decided I'm permanently here. So now I've been in formal management again for another 3 years, now in an executive role. And I love it. It's great. I love the full breadth of complete business breadth. I worry about sales and marketing and finance and product and engineering and all this stuff all in one. I worry about the business metrics. I worry about technical metrics. And I just love having my hands around the whole problem set and not just the code that I write every day.
Nice. So the clock is ticking down to your next shift, or I do feel stable? Like, okay, well, I'm gonna this time. I'm gonna fight it.
I don't know. I don't feel any particular new gravity pulling me out of this orbit.
So very interesting, because when I was thinking why I went to management or at some point in time, I realized that I can do more with a team when I'm kind of working with them. So not as individual contributor, but working more with a team. And I also hear this from you, Jamison, that you understood that you could actually shift the gears when you are leading the team and not working in just inside the team. And this was my motivation, just to how do I go next and how do I go forward? And then it's skyrocketed. And now I'm just one person in a team without any team actually. So it's very funny how it ended up. Yet now we'll see how it evolves. Well, I wanted to ask you about your skills that were important, but I think we'll pause that question, because you were talking about different things that actually people were asking, right? People were asking about different styles of engineering management in different companies. And as you were going from company to company, you obviously saw the difference in the engineering management in like startups, small companies, and huge companies. What do you think? What is the difference, and why should one go to one over the other?
Dave, I'll let you go first so that I can make my answer longer.
I was inconspicuously taking a drink to dodge the question, so you would have to answer. Sorry. I'm very thirsty. So the question is how, startup versus big company, right?
Right. And in particular about engineering management, right?
I have been an engineering manager in 3 startups, and I have been an individual contributor where I was management adjacent in a big company at Amazon, where I actually worked very, very closely with the people management team. We actually built a team from scratch from like 0 people up to about 35 people in the organization. So I was management adjacent, and I could definitely see some advantages and disadvantages. Personally, I love working at small companies. I feel like, I don't even know how to say this, but maybe it's because I can actually see a connection between the effort that I put in and the company achieving important goals. I can actually make a difference. When I was working for Amazon, there was like, I don't know, 40,000 engineers or something, so even if I give 200%, it's still like 0.0001% of the company total effort, right? So that's one reason I like.
Don't they put your name on the Reinvent slide somewhere, like in
Like-
small fonts in the end of their presentation?
Exactly.
I don't think they make projectors with high enough resolution.
And I was like,
for
it's
that.
worth. It was all worth it for this one moment. But at large companies, I learned a lot about process design. I learned about, at Amazon, I learned about operational excellence, which is a whole field that I was just completely blind to before. I learned about organizational design, incentives. I learned about goal management. I learned about business reviews, business management, basically because Amazon has such good business processes for the engineering teams that I realized it opened doors of knowledge to me that I just did not even think about before. So when I went back to smaller companies, I now had an inventory of tools I could pick from to say, yeah, we're going to implement that here. And I know it works because I saw it work at 500 teams. It's very rare at a small company to be able to say with confidence, I know this process can work at scale, because usually you only have a small number of teams to try it out on. But when I went to Amazon, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw this process work. Literally 500 teams did this process every week. I know we can do it. And that was great to be able to see that. And then I also got to see some things that didn't work very well. And I thought, I'm going to make sure to keep that on the shelf of the inventory. We're not going to bring that into our tool belt. So just getting exposure to
not
new
enough
ideas.
People are crying at work. What can I do?
We need some more bureaucracy to put some more processes, right? And we need an approval via service desk and Jira and all that stuff.
You know what we need? We need a committee to approve more things.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my take on big versus large. I think when you see the commercials, they're like part of this complete breakfast. Well, I think part of a complete engineering manager's career is having participated in both big and small companies, so that you can see the full breadth of what I don't know. It's like it's more of a complete set of exposure.
Is there a correct sequence of going, like, first you eat cereal and then you eat a croissant with a coffee and to compare with smaller and big companies? Where should you go first?
The correct way is just do exactly what I did. That should work for everyone. I honestly,
that sounds very confident.
I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know what the correct order is. I don't think it really matters in the end. I think there's many, many paths to having a fulfilling and successful professional career in engineering management.
I think the correct way is you tilt your head back and you fill your mouth up with milk, and then you drop the cereal in piece by piece.
It's the no bowls, and then, no bowl version of
eating. Exactly. Yeah, save some resources. My first answer is the same as Dave's. The way I did it, obviously,
the only
correct. But I'm gonna try and justify. I don't think that's not true. Clearly, lots of ways will work. I think if you start out at a smaller company, you have to figure out a lot of stuff by yourself, or kind of less on your own. There's less structure and process in place for you. It can be good and bad. You might stumble across your own idea and get to see it work. You might fail horribly. Whereas if you start at a big company, generally a lot of the important ways we do things will be kind of, I don't know if solved is the right word.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work, but
at least there's a process for that, right? Like there's a solution.
Yeah, there's a structure, and you get to kind of absorb that, and that's part of how you become more effective at a big company. Is you learn more about how that specific big company process works. And it can be hard to go from there's an answer for everything somewhere in here, I just have to find out who knows it, to like, oh, it's all on me.
Yeah.
Which is, I think in some ways it could be easier, though more frustrating, to go from the small company where it's all on you to the big company where you might not like the answers, but it's easier to step into tighter constraints than to go from having a lot of problems solved for you by the organization to now you have to go figure them all out. Like recruiting. We have a recruiting department, and I badmouth them because I hate them, but they exist and they do a lot of stuff for me. And some of it I probably don't realize.
Yeah.
And then if I show up at a company and now it's my responsibility to do everything with recruiting along with all the other stuff, then it might be a little bit harder than to kind of figure out from scratch. But
I agree.
People make it work every way.
And I want to change my answer because I think that when you are inexperienced in the field, well, I didn't say I was going to change it to your answer, Jamison.
Oh, okay. Dang it.
I actually don't know, but I want to.
Because you gave the same answer, right?
I want to give an answer that's a little bit more opinionated on this. I think that when I look back at my experience, when I first started working, I got very lucky. I worked at a small company that gave engineers a lot of latitude. We were allowed to make decisions, do things for ourselves. We had very little management structure, very little product management, very little project managers. We just did it. And we were young enough and inexperienced enough to foolishly just try things. And some of them worked really well. But when I think back to that situation and I think, oh my goodness, if I were in charge of that company today and I had a bunch of people with my level of inexperience, there's no way I would let them run amok like these people let me run amok. But I am so grateful that they did because I think that if I had had that same level of latitude given to me when I was older, I would have moved, I don't mean to say older, when I was more experienced, I would have moved much more slowly and cautiously, and we would not have made the progress that we made and delivered the awesome stuff because I would have been like, well, got to make sure there's a process for this. We got to make sure we're not making any mistakes. But when you're inexperienced, you don't even know what all the mistakes are. And so you just make them and it's fine. And you recover from them because you're fast and nimble. So I think that if you start your career at a giant company where most of the decisions have been made for you and are prescribed and you have guardrails that you operate within, you are missing out on an opportunity to spread your foolish wings and make all these awesome mistakes and learn from yourself that you would otherwise have at a small company.
I tend to agree, but I go from a different point of view because in the big company, you might be lazy, right? So you're there, everything's set up, and you are not learning from your neither success nor mistakes. It's just the environment where you swim and you just do your job, and you might not know there is an HR department exists
or not do your job.
Department or
it's very possible to just also not do your job.
Yeah.
And still
or not. Indeed. So you're just in that corporate environment and swimming through from breakfast to lunch.
Yeah.
And they're going for a coffee break with colleagues that you hardly know what are doing, but they're good and talking in the kitchen about the politics. That's it. And you might learn zero from that. And then when you're in a startup or a smaller company, you're forced to do this because there's a boss who's asking like, okay, what's going on, right? Or you are the boss at some point in time, or you've been pushed to a boss. Therefore, I would say like, well, if you're brave enough, just go with a small company.
Yeah.
First.
And I have an example of this. When I was working at a small company, I was maybe 8 or 9 years into my career. There was a problem where we had a set of web servers, and sometimes different code would get deployed on different web servers because of dependencies. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is a really challenging problem to solve with our particular architecture. And I was responsible for the team building this, and we just never solved it. We just said, it happens rarely. It's no big deal. Then I went to Amazon. And now that I knew about this problem, at Amazon, I went there and I realized, oh my gosh, their built-in systems solve this problem for you automatically so engineers don't have to think about it. It's solved by default. And I remember talking to other engineers who had been at Amazon a long time, and I said, isn't this system amazing? It solves all these problems. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, they just totally took it for granted. They didn't even think of it as a problem because they had never had to think about it as a problem because it had never bitten them because someone else solved it 10 years ago, and now everyone benefits from that solution. And so likewise, if you go to a big company to start with, you might not even realize the problems that have already been solved for you before you showed up.
Isn't that a common trope about ex-Google employees that they leave and then they build parts of Google's infrastructure as a separate company?
Yeah, they rebuild it and sell it.
Yeah, we miss Borg. Better build Kubernetes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just taking the ideas and okay, we'll have it here. Just let's spin another company and be funded by Google, which is kind of strange, but well, it works out for some people. But on the other side, with a big company, if you're in the circumstances where you have to get to know other people, where you're pushed by your tasks to go and talk to other departments, it's a way better to be at that place, because then you're learning their soft communication skills, which is extremely important, and you understand that every part of the company has a reason why they're doing this or different way, and you are kind of trying to go around the corners to find a solution around those ways for your particular problem, and then it's a very different experience if you're in that position.
100% agree. I can say that because I started out at small companies in my career, by the time I got to a big company, my communication skills and my organization skills were highly underdeveloped. And I really learned a lot those 4 years on how to navigate an org chart, how to find the right decision makers, how to influence when I don't have authority, things like that. Things that I never had to worry about before because we're all just running around with our hair on fire.
I remember thinking before I had worked at a large company, it's weird how everyone that works there is bad at their jobs, because you have all these negative things that happen at big companies. Like, man, there's just something about all the people that go to work there that's different from me, where it makes them bureaucratic and slow. And part of what I realized was, I like what you said, Alex, about you learn about the inherent weaknesses of human communication and organization. And it's not that everyone who is bad at communicating and loves politics goes to work at a big company. Yeah. It's that's what happens when you try to get 100,000 people working together on something.
Yeah.
And so part of what it did to me was help me shed some of my hubris that like I am good at this stuff, and no, it's just I only have to talk to 100 people, and so
right.
there's less room for layers and layers of management and incentives and stuff like that. I thought of one other thing I enjoyed about a big company. I feel like it's easy to be negative, I guess, but I did learn a ton. And one thing I liked about working at a big company is, I don't know, so I worked at Walmart, and it's the only big company I've worked at. I don't know that the like average skill level was different than at other places I've worked, but because there are so many more people, the extremes are way more extreme. Like I worked with some incredibly talented, brilliant people. The top 1% of 10,000 engineers is going to be pretty special. And it was cool to see those people. And you had the opposite as well, which is less cool. But part of being in a big org is if you get exposed to that many people, there's going to be some pretty exceptional ones. And some people I still think about and think about the stuff I learned from to this day.
When you went to a big company, did you have a fear to talk to the executive level, which is different from a small company, right?
Yeah, I don't know about Dave, but I remember being scared. I don't know. I think I fear authority just in general as my personality. So just the fact that there's a tree and someone's like 5 levels above me makes me just affects my heart rate inherently, which it shouldn't. I don't know. They're just people.
I think I'm missing.
It's just a title. Come on.
I think I'm missing some survival gene or something, because I just have like this healthy disregard for authority. But the company I worked for was so big, I actually never met anyone on the executive team. I one time heard once that one of the executives was in my building after they had already left.
I talked to my boss's boss a few times. I'm trying to think of how many layers there were. I think there were like 5 layers between me and the CTO. And then once it got to the CTO, there was some arcane cloud of hierarchy that I couldn't fathom, but somehow there was a relationship to the CEO, but I don't know what it was. But I talked to my boss's boss a few times. And then one time I talked to the CEO and the VP that reported to the CEO. And that was very interesting because I got to see the difference. One of the things I learned is you should probably, if you don't want them to be mad, you should tell your boss's boss's boss first before you talk to your boss's 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 boss.
Pro
Because
tip.
we like presented this cool idea, and the CTO said, "That's pretty cool. I think we should do it." And it was kind of vaguely political, kind of not trying to say anything too specific, but vaguely encouraging. And the VP was much less so in subsequent conversations because we had not gotten their approval beforehand, which was a fun thing to realize that it didn't matter.
They respect the hierarchy. You should have respected that hierarchy. And
in that case, yeah. I mean, it's different at every org, and I don't know. I think eventually we did end up building the thing we presented, but it did hit some stumbles because we started top down instead of going more bottom up.
I once was working for one customer of a big international organization, and I was at the customer site. And there I had the chance to talk to the CEO, but it was a very weird occasion because I was standing in the men's room, and then he was just standing next to me, and he has been appointed to CEO at that day, and it was like, oh, okay, like, congratulations. And you're like, who are you? Well, I'm from the company. I work for you. Okay, well, good.
All right, see you later.
We didn't shake hands, just for disclosure, right?
Oh, okay. He didn't have his own private bathroom yet.
No, yeah, that comes later.
Not at that point in time.
Well, I do have one more thought on big company versus small company, and I don't know how widespread this is, but my personal experience, and Jamison, I suspect also true for you, is financially, I made a lot more money at a big company than I did at the small company.
That is true for me as well.
So if you want
isn't
to
that what
earn,
life is
go
all about?
there.
Life's all about making money.
No, yeah, I did make a lot more money there, and there's a reason I took a pay cut to leave.
Yeah, me too.
But having made a bunch of money made it a lot easier to take a pay cut to leave.
Yeah, that's true. In other words, work at a big company so that you can afford to work at a small company.
You can you sell out for a little bit, but when you sell out, you get stuff in return.
Yeah.
You can use that to buy other stuff. You can work at a big company and not make as much money as well. It kind of depends on timing and role, and you can strike it rich at a small company.
Yes, and
but I think you're right, Dave, that also we timed the interest rates pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, these things are definitely
unknowingly.
Connected. The fact that I was able to get a job is definitely connected to the fact that these companies were rife with cash.
But then it helps you in the future because you're putting like Amazon on the table. Oh, wow, you work at Amazon.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Let me get you in, or Facebook or Google or whatever big company.
On the flip side, almost everyone I know at Amazon has been laid off.
But they now can say, well, I've seen the Amazon from inside.
Maybe.
Let me show you how to not to run the company that I'm joining. Right. Okay. Well, thanks. Let's go to the next one, which was, I don't know. Dave, do you want to choose one?
I choose number 3. I'm just kidding. I don't know what.
Number 3.
I'm just making it up.
All right.
I see a number 3. There is a number 3.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, 2.C. Let's go to 2.C, which is number 3 for me. Okay. What T-shaped skills should their developer have to become a manager?
So T-shaped, this is kind of the idea that when you take a paintbrush and run it horizontally, that some of the lines go deeper and some go shallower, the drips, right? And so you say, I have T-shaped skills. I have general skills, and then I have some specific skills that are more developed. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Oh man, I have no idea. Let's see. The kinds of skills that come that are necessary to be an effective engineering manager tend to be very challenging to measure and even challenging to observe. And that's funny because being an engineer is also full of skills that are hard to measure and hard to observe. Like you made a joke about counting lines of code, which is like in some ways maybe an okay measure of developer productivity, but in other ways, it's a terrible way to measure developer productivity and a terrible incentive, right? Like number of tickets closed, number of lines changed in your code reviews, and an engineering manager has even less concrete ways to measure your effectiveness. But I think probably one of the most important skills that you need to develop is the ability to communicate clearly. And I think that the one phrase that really sticks with me about this is they say, it's good to communicate so that you can be understood. But as a manager, you need to communicate so that you cannot be misunderstood. And I see this over and over and over. And I think my first experience with this was when I just became a director and I was talking to a team and they were telling me about something they had built. And I was like, this is not what I want. This is not a good idea. Why did you build this way? And they said, because you told us to. And I said, I did not mean to tell you to build it this way. I don't know what I said or what I did to make you think that this is what I wanted, but this is not what I want. And I've thought about that a lot. So like a lot of times now when I communicate, I will say things like, here's what I want. And here are 3 things I do not want. Like that you might be adjacent to the thing or might be a synonym or possibly mistakable for the thing that I did say. Here's what I'm specifically not saying. Anyway, so those kinds of skills I think are probably among the most valuable management skills.
I think there's a set of skills that make you look like a good manager that is related to the set of skills that make you a good manager around being outgoing and gregarious and well-spoken. And I think those are not, some people think you're required to have those skills to be a good engineering manager, but I think that's not the case. That's just maybe a stereotype of a manager is someone who I don't know, presents really well in meetings and they have like an executive presence about them. And you do not need that. But I've seen that dissuade some people who would be good at it because they think they don't have these like flashy skills around it.
I will say, Jamison, that I agree with you that you do not need executive presence and other kind of superficial skills.
You need it as an executive. There's a reason why they call it executive.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you do intend to grow to, like, I'll call them higher in air quotes levels of management where you have more people reporting to you, unfortunately, the flashy side of things and the executive presence will become necessary.
Just to come to a manager, you're kind of, what should you do? Or learn to, I don't know, communicate, learn to not to code, learn to delegate. Lots of those things are kind of on the table.
Learn how to stop coding.
I like what you said, Dave, about communication and not being misunderstood. And Alex, you mentioned delegating, and that's been hard for me. I think I don't even know if I delegate well now, but I know I did not used to. I know I used to be worse at it even. And that's, as a technical person that becomes a manager, it's great that you have the background to know how you could do it if you're doing the task. But it's also hard because when you become a manager, how it's done matters a little bit less. It's more about the results and less about the way it's done. And it can be tough to pull yourself out of, I would do it this way, into what is the outcome that I want and how do I abstract over the implementation. So I've found it useful to focus on outcomes and be really clear with people about what outcomes I want. And then if people have questions or if they want to have a discussion or feedback, or if I think the specific actions they're taking mean they will not achieve the outcome, then I can dive into the kind of implementation level. But if not, it makes it a lot easier to be hands off and let people do their thing without micromanaging them, which is a thing that can be easy to do if you know how you would do the thing that you're asking someone else to do.
I love that, Jamison. I think this is probably one of the hardest things to let go of when you move from being an individual contributor into management, because as an individual contributor, we live and die by these details of how it is done. Like, it's the most important thing. Did I do this well? And as a manager, you have to learn how to distinguish between details that matter to the outcome and details that don't matter to the outcome. And it's very easy to get stuck, where as a manager, you're making the team run in circles, chasing these unimportant details, and they just want to please you, so they'll keep doing it, or they'll argue with you and you'll fight about it, and then now you're spending the team's time on things that don't matter, and really challenging. You got to let go of that.
I've heard once a phrase, my way or highway. So this is a phrase not to do, right? So just make sure you point the team the direction or the result and communicate it clear, but then let the team solve their things and do their job, right? Not to say, okay, this is a step A, B, C. Just try to help them to go to the solution and remove all the obstacles. That's it. So you're there to remove all those small obstacles, organization stuff, or I don't know, whatever comes their communication with different other teams, but just to make sure that they have enough of resources, enough of knowledge to complete the task or to complete the work.
Which sounds great. And I got to tell you, it's one of the strange things about engineering management is that for every situation or for every statement you make, like, oh yeah, you should get out of people's way and give them a destination, there are always exceptions. And I think that's one of the things that makes management so hard is you have to know, am I in an exceptional circumstance here? And the answer could very well be that some engineers actually need you to give them A, B, and C in order for them to be effective. And some engineers say, leave me alone, just give me the destination, I'll figure out A, B, and C on how to get there. And so you have to actually learn how to understand people at a level that you probably didn't need to understand before, because the computers don't have preferences like that. They just do what you give them the code and they execute. But a lot of people need different, like, hey, I work well in a pair programming environment. I work well when I get specific detailed instruction from my leader. I work well when I get, results given to me and I execute, so, and then of course, how do you even hire those people? It's like, what kind of people do I want on my team? I need to be able to assess that talent and know if I'm hiring the people who want details given to them, and are we set up for that? Or are people who want results given to them, and are we set up for that? And so it's like, I don't know, man, management is very challenging that way for me, because I've never been great at reading people, and knowing what they want and like their work style is just, I don't know, very, very challenging for me.
Yeah, and it's not the lead code thing that you have to solve, right? So if you ask for a management, when you hire a manager, you're not saying, okay, this is a problem from the lead code, just go and solve it on the whiteboard. Yeah. You ask there tricky questions without straight answers, right? And the answer is not, it depends. It doesn't work. You have to kind of see what are the triggers that you might want to pull, or which way you go, and then see how you deviate from the way that you've chosen in the very beginning.
I'm going to say 2 more skills. I don't know if this counts as T-shaped. It's just block shaped. You draw the line and then the paint goes all the way down everywhere. But and actually, I'll preface this by saying part of what is cool is everyone is a different T. There's not one specific T, and you can be stronger or weaker at a bunch of different areas, and that informs your management style. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. When you're managing, you're generally working with longer feedback loops. You don't have a test you can run on the code to say, did it work?
Yeah.
It can be months or years until you see the impact of a change, or you can discern the impact of a change that you've made. So I think you have to get really good at listening, because you have to gather a lot more information actively to see if stuff is working. And some of that'll be just talking to people. Some of it'll be observing people. Some of it'll be observing changes in output or direction. You have to kind of be at the center of this web of information. And then you have to be I keep saying have to. I'm trying not to be too prescriptive here. I'll keep saying it. Whatever. Ignore what I just said. I'm going to keep saying you have to. You have to. You must.
This is a requirement.
You have to be good at distilling this vague information you're collecting into a decision at a point where it's rarely clear. So I'll give an example, because this is very fuzzy. Say you're trying to decide if the team needs more, more regular meetings to talk about status. And you have some inputs, which is that engineers always complain about meetings, because everyone does, because meetings generally suck. And you have some instances of people being unclear about what they should work on. And like you have these competing inputs that say this, maybe don't do this because it'll make them grumpy, but we need to know what we're doing and clear up these points of confusion that pop up when we don't talk. And then you try it out for a few weeks, and engineers complain because they have more meetings, but you see more stuff is getting done, or you see the absence of these communication issues. At some point, you have to make a call. This is what we are doing going forward, or it is not. And there are often situations where the answer is unclear, and you still have to make that call, which is different in some ways than code. There's some of that in code as well. You're kind of predicting the future when you're designing systems, but I've found there to be a lot more ambiguity.
Oh yeah.
Even when I'm collecting more information as a manager. So I guess the short summary of what I'm saying is you need to collect a lot of information and still make decisions in ambiguous circumstances.
100%. And I totally agree with that. And a corollary to that is that not only do you have to be comfortable with ambiguity and unclear decision making, but also unexpected things. Like if you are the kind of person who does not deal well with surprises, then probably management is not for you. Or you're going to have to learn how to overcome that. I'll just give a couple of examples. I had a team member on my team when I was a director. I managed this person for about a year. We met every week. We had one-on-ones every week. And every week I sat across the table and said, "How are you doing?" And the person said, "I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Things are going great." Awesome. Then one day, this person, I walk into my office. This person's laptop is sitting on my chair with a Post-it note that says, "I quit." I'm like, what? What is going on? Totally unexpected. Like I had no idea, blindsided. Now we got to backfill this person. There was a bunch of tasks they were working on that were important. And that kind of surprise happens, I don't know, 10 times a year or something to me, where you come into work one day planning to do one thing. Nope. The world has something else in store for you today.
And it also depends on the organization where you're working. If it's a chaotic organization that brings additional level of complexity, like the boss just calls you in and says, like, "Come into my office, I have a new urgent task for you." Wow, what's going on, man? So it might be indeed very hard for well-organized people. But on the other hand, if you go as an engineering manager to a well-established company, then basically, well, whatever happens, the person quit, you just go to their HR department and say, "I need a replacement for that person." That's it. So it's quite easy. So still, if you are not coping with their complexity and with the hard things, just go to a big company and try, as you said, not to do your work there.
Yeah. Well said.
I found it easier. I find it easier to deal with chaos at a small company because I expect it. Whereas when there's chaotic changes at a big company, I'm always surprised that they survived this long, if that's how things work, like surely this can't be how you deal with this problem. Look at how many people work here. Look how much money you make. Like you got to have it all figured out. So it's not that there's necessarily more chaos at a small company, but of course there is. There should be.
Yeah.
But I'm less surprised by it.
Jamison, you mentioned there one thing that also was in the questions of the listeners is meetings, because indeed they suck, and everybody is getting sucked into them. And the question is it possible to be an engineering manager and have less than 6 hours of meeting per day?
Yes, it is. I am one, and I have fewer than 6 hours of meetings per day. But I've also not had that in other places. Yeah. I mean, I think meetings are a common default state where if you have a problem, if you need to communicate something or gather some information, in many orgs, the default way to do that is schedule a meeting. And there are places that are different that try very hard to work asynchronously or avoid meetings. But I think in general, that's kind of the norm is meetings are the way you get work done as a manager. So if you hate meetings, you either need to know you're going to spend a lot of time in meetings that you are unhappy in, or you need to know you'll be taking on the task of shifting this culture away from requiring as many meetings, both of which are kind of tricky. If you work at a small enough company, though, then there just aren't enough people to have 6 hours of meetings every day. So you can
schedule a meeting with yourself. Just sit there and okay, well, I'll still have a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself more exhausted by meetings as a manager because I'm in them more. But I usually have a need that they're meeting. Meeting is an overloaded word in this context. There's usually something I want out of a meeting.
Yeah, you're not
Whereas
just being
as an IC, I remember going to a lot of meetings that I think I there's nothing for me here. I have nothing to contribute, nothing to get out of this. And I find that's less common as a manager. So
That's a good point.
lessens some of the pain. There's a problem I'm trying to solve or information I'm trying to gather. You switch from the target of meetings to the person targeting other people with meetings. And that's you got to be mindful of that you are now the person sucking people in. It's easy to schedule a meeting that is useful for you without it being clear why it is useful for other people. So I'm not answering the question directly because I already said yes, I guess, but now I'm just waxing philosophical about meetings. I found it helpful. wax on. Isn't that Mr. Miyagi?
Yeah. I didn't mean it that way, but it came out
the
great.
Karate Kid? Yeah. Yeah, it's like you have a button you can press now that will cost the company $1,000. Because it's very natural for your manager to schedule a meeting with like 3 people and they talk and then that's all that money is gone.
I never thought about that, but my calendaring app is like the most expensive app on my desktop.
Yeah, for sure. I can slow productivity to a halt very easily, and everyone has to come.
And I can even set
up
recurring
to all at some company.
Yeah, email might be the second most expensive program on your computer.
Slack is cheap because everyone just ignores the messages. Email's a little harder.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I typically have about 5 to 6 hours of meetings per day on average when spread across 5 days. It is definitely the hardest part about being a manager, in my opinion, when it comes to time management, is finding time to actually do the productive individual work you need to do. Whether it's writing documentation, providing guidance to the team in the form of written material, performance reviews or strategic planning, all these things take time individually. And if you allow your calendar...
Don't you have weekends for that
stuff? Yeah, exactly. I had a customer who used to say, there's 48 hours at the end of every week. What are you complaining about? Anyway.
All right, children, gather round as we strategically plan for the upcoming quarter for Dad's job.
Yes, it's Saturday, kids. You know what that means.
Yep.
Quarterly planning. We're going to go camping and quarterly planning. So I can't remember what I was going to say about that, but it was going to be good. Oh, yeah. So it turns out calendar management skill is actually another important management skill, because what tends to happen is that meetings appear on your calendar, or you create meetings for the team in non-optimal ways. Like, do you remember the old Windows computers had the defragmenting tool? And that was because data on your hard drive got allocated around the disk such that it was non-optimal for reading back at high speed. Well, that happens to calendars too. Meetings get fragmented. They're not contiguous, or you just have like 15 to 30 minute blocks between meetings, which it's just not enough time to do deep work and be productive. And so one time at my last company, I actually got assigned to me an executive admin. And I didn't keep the admin for very long because we had to downsize. But in the short time, it was bad timing. In the short time that I had this person, they reorganized my calendar, and it made a huge difference to my productivity. They color coded all my different meetings of different categories. So like one-on-ones were one color, and like team meetings were another color, and blocked off time that could not be scheduled, where I had 2 to 4 hour blocks of time for deep individual work. And I so appreciated that. I've kept that habit where I actually put meeting time on my calendar that's not actually meeting. Like you said, Alex, like scheduling a meeting for myself. It's just time for me. People, by default, people can't schedule my time there. But of course I can delete it and make it available to them as needed. And that has made such a huge difference to my overall well-being as a manager.
Do you call it nap time in your calendar?
Mark as public.
Dave has 4 hours of nap time every day. Wow.
And we all work from home. I guess you work from home, so your sofa is very close, and you don't have to put a lot of effort into then going to nap time.
It's wonderful.
It's one of the benefits. Working from home rules.
I just want to be mindful of your time and want to go to the last question, which actually has been inspired by your podcast. So what you discuss a lot of times in their answering the questions is how technical their EM should be. This comes in various forms. either in terms of review, how their EM can review the job of technical people, how to set goals to technical people, how to talk to them when you're coming from different backgrounds, have to keep up. So lots of people are asking, okay, I'm in the manager job, I have no time to code. How do I keep up my technical skills? So I would put it in a simple way. I don't know whether it's simplifiers or not. Let's see. So is a EM a technical person or is EM not technical person?
We have actually answered this question on our podcast, and suddenly I'm panicking, hoping we don't give a different answer here.
Oh, we can say whatever we want. We don't need to be consistent, Dave. Come on.
You're saying you don't care about our legacy?
We probably answered it inconsistently several times.
Yeah, this has
So
come up a few
we've
times.
got
So
plenty to cover.
for those that don't know, our podcast is called Soft Skills Engineering. You can find it at softskills.audio. And if you go to our episode search and search technical management, you'll find this question or one similar to it. Actually, many times.
Well, at least ChatGPT, when I asked about Engineering-менеджер, provided me like 10 episodes from this year. So it's all different.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, come on. EM is a broad topic and has lots of different aspects. So people tackle it from different sides, and therefore, well, just let's focus on one question, and then people can go ahead and listen to all 300 or 400 already episodes that you guys have.
Yeah, and I mean,
I'm gonna
go for it, Jamison. You answer. I'll just agree with whatever you say.
I'm gonna give an analogy. Okay, good. Then I'm gonna change my answer. Something more outrageous. Just kidding. So I do not know a ton about cars, so I'm gonna give an analogy based on that context. But if someone knows a lot about cars, then it won't make sense to them. So when I go to the mechanic, I have like this vague distrust of what they're going to say, but I have no way of verifying it. I can watch a 10-minute YouTube video really quick about alternators and then maybe convince myself I understand them, but I don't actually understand them. And that makes it really hard to have input into the work that's happening on my car. I sort of just say, I trust you or I don't. And I think if you are not technical trying to manage software engineers, you're going to be in the same situation. Slightly different. They're not going to try and upsell you all the time, but they will sometimes, because boy, do engineers love refactoring and code quality cleanup initiatives and stuff. And sometimes that's the equivalent of like, you need these brand new ceramic windshield wipers. I don't know. That actually sounds horrible. That'd probably cut your windshield off. So my point is, I think engineering managers need to be technical because part of the information that you're gathering is technical, and you're responsible for the team, but you're also responsible for the output of the team. The output of the team is this technical system, and if you aren't capable of understanding it because you don't have enough technical background, you're gonna be taking someone else's word for it and making a lot of analogies in your head, but you won't really understand it. And I've read enough like newspaper articles about something I know well to know that the person who wrote that article interviewed someone and thought, this makes sense, I think I get it. Or I'll like write, I don't know, even entertainment based on something I know well. But they really don't. There's critical pieces missing. So it's really easy to convince yourself you understand something by analogy, and knowing enough about software to be able to build the thing yourself given infinite time makes it a lot easier to challenge the team and check assumptions and course correct, versus you waiting for someone else to tell you we need to do this thing.
Well, I think you just convinced me that I understand completely everything that I need to know.
I fell victim to this a lot in math class when I was watching YouTube videos.
It all makes sense in class.
Yeah, if a person with a PhD does it in front of me, I do understand it.
Right.
Therefore, I will do it on the test.
Isn't it interesting how there seems to be such a big difference between feeling like something is clear when presented to you and then actually having to present that information? It's like 100x difference in effort.
Yeah, that's a different skill to teach something or explain something, and basically, okay, how can I get it structured in my head?
Yeah.
So Jamison,
How
I
do I
have
put
to
it
ask
into
you.
words?
You said something that really struck me. Do you read the newspaper?
Not on purpose. I read Twitter, which I guess kind of
It's the modern newspaper.
both absorbs the newspaper and like gets skimmed to generate parts of it.
And now with our latest Twitter policy, it's also limited, right? So you're stop at some point in time when you're scrolling to the end of Twitter.
I have not encountered the limit yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about my Twitter habits, but
so on the topic of engineering managers being technically skilled or not, my personal preference is yes, all engineering managers should be technically skilled, and that is very much strongly informed by my bias because that is my background. So I'm like, well, yeah, of course I am more valuable.
Convenient for us.
Yes, how convenient.
Yeah.
But also, as I think back over the last 20 years in this career, 20 years ago, there was actually such a small number of people with enough experience and a background in software development to be an engineering manager that they were more rare. I think the first several of my managers were either not engineers at all or were like electrical engineers or some adjacent field that was a little bit more established. And now that seems to be not the case. Like almost every manager that I meet now has software engineering individual contributor experience. And I personally think that's a great thing for all the reasons Jamison said.
When I meet non-technical people or non-technical EMs, what I'm advising them is to kind of learn their language of engineers. So they can explain in 2 or 3 sentences whatever their engineer is doing.
Yeah.
And if their non-technical person can go to this level of abstraction to kind of, talk in your words, say what the team is doing without going deep, then you can kind of not go in their engineering management, but be a project manager to coordinate these things and understand the lingua of the team, understand what is, DevOps, what is Jira, what is their YAML, whatever technical term the team is doing. So just go and talk in 2 sentences, and then you will be good enough to be able to communicate with the team, because you will feel like the pain and the connection with the things that they explaining. Not this is not some random words, but they do make sense to me.
Exactly.
There's a science fiction book called Blindside that I really love, and I just read it again. I've read it a bunch of times because I like it, as I said, I guess. And one of the plot points is there are these kind of post-human people. They've got superhuman intellect and abilities some way, and they send along someone whose job is to interpret these people. And it reminds me of what it might be like to be a non-technical person working with engineers. Not that they're superhuman or whatever, but the point is like the person doing the interpreting for the people back on Earth couldn't do what they do and doesn't really understand it, but they do have some way of distilling the information down in a way that sort of makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if you're, I think that's what you're talking about, Olex, where you wouldn't be able to go like set up Postgres, but you understand vaguely what it means when someone is saying, I'm tuning our database queries to be faster or something. And yeah, I think the most effective non-engineers that I've worked with that are like project managers or product managers or engineering managers all have developed that ability, even if they couldn't do it themselves.
Yeah, then when they hear for their 10th time, well, we have to do some refactoring, they will start asking questions finally.
Yeah. What exactly does this refactoring mean? Will it affect my end-of-year performance bonus?
All right, then. Thank you very much for this discussion and for answering questions. Which one did you like the most out of those questions which we touched or that you had in your list?
Which question?
Yeah.
I like the one you asked that made Jamison feel really uncomfortable. What was that one? Just
that's the joke. I always feel uncomfortable. I liked the one about 6 hours of meetings because it made me think about it. It's sort of thinking about the air I'm breathing. Sometimes I just forget about it, take it for granted.
Yeah.
And meetings tend to multiply if you have to curate them. You need to
Mhm.
kind of tend to them like they're a tree that needs to be pruned.
Well, I like that analogy. You prune meetings like you prune trees, or else they grow too big for their own roots.
Yep.
Take care of your garden.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Don't let your meetings fill with weeds. We could go all day on
and
this one.
if you want to do something, do it by yourself, right? not get the gardener. Or, well, in your case, Dave, you had a good person to take care of your garden.
Yeah, you
briefly,
did have a
yeah.
gardener,
It was awesome.
a calendar gardener.
That's right.
That might be a good euphemism for
Oh, yeah.
like engineering manager.
Oh
now.
yeah.
Calendar gardener.
My job is to plant
could
as
be a
many
new
meetings
position.
on as many calendars as possible. Let 1,000 meetings
What's
bloom.
like the genetically modified organism of this analogy? Status reviews.
It can't be killed
take
by
over
weed
everything.
killer. A meeting that won't die.
And then put them in different colors, so they kind of go from green to red, right? As,
Like changing of the seasons.
Yes.
I love it.
I love the look of my calendar in October. It's so beautiful.
Well, Alex, thank
Good.
you for having us on here.
Yeah, thank you.
This is
Yeah.
great to talk to you about this stuff.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. So, dear listeners, just go to or first subscribe now to this channel before you go to softskills.audio, and we'll put the link in description below. So, I guess the best way is to go and listen to both of podcasts in the future. And yeah, indeed, thank you guys for this amazing conversation.